Continuing the stitch welding along the seams, I worked my way along the inside of the sill between those roll cage pickup points and past all the bits where I have brackets for the seats. There's quite a lot of sealant in here, so it needs a good bit of cleaning. And in fact, the way the floor bends up and meets the sill, there's actually a pocket kind of left for the sealant, so it actually makes it easier to actually scrape out quite a good bit of it. I'll do that using a hammer and a big broad screwdriver, just tapping it along. I don't want to damage the sill, but I can actually spread out this tab from the floor and loosen up a good bit of this stuff. It's just it'll burn like crazy when I'm doing the welding. It's quite satisfying when you start getting it out in good big chunks. Another option would have been to weld underneath at the join, but I think that would have been even more challenging because you'd then both be battling gravity and the flaming sealant. So I'm now tapping back the edge of that flap into the void from the sealant. I'm actually using this lever bar now as it has a good wide profile, and I can just pinch it nicely around so that the edge has good contact with the sill. You can see it there from this angle. I don't need to do anything, I think, with the top join. I think this is more than enough for the sills, because this car is going to have double door bars, so there's quite a lot of strength between the roll cage pickup points in that area. I would like to strengthen up between the main hoop and the rear stays though, along here. There's a little bit less sealant in all this, but that ridge which is underneath the back seat, which is over the fuel tank, which is not there, I have that removed. It makes it a bit awkward for the grinder to get in, so I use the drill with a little wire wheel on that. Back to the grinder there, and yeah, a little bit to the top. I want to get as much of this done as possible with the cage in, because if you remember, I'm actually using the cage as a jig to hold the car square. I put in the cage with the car shell level and nice and relaxed, so settled in position. So I want to get most of this done, but I'm going to take the cage out for painting, and I'll do a few extra little welds then that were hard to access while the cage was in. Now, moving on to the rear boot area. This is why I chose this type of Kadett D shell. There were a hatchback and a saloon version, which both had the same silhouette, and I think that this has the potential to be a much stronger shell and therefore give better handling without too much of a weight sacrifice. The rear tailgates were very heavy, so someone has actually chopped through the metal parcel shelf on this car. I think a European style roll cage, which actually came back higher than the safety devices one that I have, and came down on top of the suspension turret area. I'd say that cage was just fitted cosmetically because there was no reinforcing done to the car for it. They came down through there and onto that, so it's quite a different routing, and strangely, like, it basically gives space around the passenger area. I think the car actually that was 7th in the 1984 Swedish round of the World Rally Championship with Kenneth Eriksson. I think that had that type of cage. Another interesting thing that car had was a white steering wheel, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, we're not doing a GTE, we're doing an SR. So I want to reinforce this wheel arch because it supports that suspension turret for the damper, and I think I can introduce quite a bit of rigidity into the back of the car, which could help the handling. I have squeezed into the boot to do this, and I'm getting nicely covered in all this sealant. I like the idea that this could have the effect of having a rear strut brace. Again, a lot of sealant in here, and I'm using the technique that I did on the bulkhead in sections and also on those bits of the sill. I'll do a couple of light little welds to burn out the last bit of the sealant in the area that I'm going to weld, and then I'll do a nice solid continuous weld in a stitch over those. There's actually 3 pieces of metal joining along that edge of the arch. So you've got this serpentine rear chassis arm, and then that has a tab that folds horizontal, and the floor meets on top of that, and the arch comes down beside them, the both. So the chassis member's tab actually bends down and meets the bottom of the arch, and then the floor sits on top, and there's a bit of a gap in some places between the floor and the arch, so I'll try and broaden out my welds to join the 3 pieces together, cleaning off as much of the paint and sealant around where the welds are going to be, just to reduce the amount of burning. Now I'm sweeping up all that material that I've removed, so it's not a fire risk, and I'll start the welding. So as I said, doing the sills with a couple of small light little welds to get started, burn off the last of that sealant, and then do nice continuous ones over the top of that. The best way I can see to do this at the moment, short of having the car dipped, which wasn't part of my budget, either time or financially. So I'm cleaning out, actually, there. I noticed there's a captive nut here for belts. I'm probably not going to use them, but I still don't want to destroy the threads. You never know, this car could get some road use at some point. Maybe the cage could even be removed, so I don't want to destroy them with bits of weld dribbling down into them. So I used the shortest seatbelt bolts I could find and put them in there. As you can see, I'm welding right beside them, and even this welding is it's stripping down sparks towards that. So working my way up the arch where it joins the inner quarter panel. There's no sealant here, so the challenge with this is that the metal is so light, so I'm just pulsing the welder here now to get a nice weld on that. So these stays, which form the back of the back seat, I haven't actually been in a Kadett D saloon where this hasn't cracked, so that really shows. They break up at the top of that diagonal, and that shows that stresses from the car are transferring into this, so it would be nice to help it to be more rigid. Now the seatbelt bar that I put into the cage will help with that too. This one was broken before and repaired by somebody else, and you can see those are factory welds down at the bottom, because their spot welders wouldn't have been able to reach into that section, so somebody must have dived in here quickly in the factory and hastily MIG welded those. I'm just strengthening up the parcel shelf back past the top of the damper mounting below it, so I don't think going back as far as the glass is kind of excessive. Glass and everything will actually add rigidity back there too. Now I'm doing the top mount of the suspension, and that's a little bit on the inside of the back of the seat, the rear seat area. And now I'm doing a continuous one over some light welds on the base of the wheel arch. Still flaming up a fair bit for me, but got a good weld there now, and that's joining the floor panel and the chassis member that comes up from the bottom and the edge of the wheel arch. Worked all the way around the top of that as well. So the rear end of the car is getting the same kind of strengthening as the front, so it should be worthy. I'll do another session underneath on the lower pickup points of the suspension, but that's the work now on the top of the rear.